want to turn to this vision of an empowered, active citizenry that you have laid out in this new book. Because, as I say, you don't dwell on all of the crises and problems so much in this book. You talk about what it means to be part of a democracy, and you take people who feel, I think, probably more disaffected, more separate from the political process than ever, who really feel deeply, deeply cynical about the media, about Congress, about the presidency, about institutions generally. I mean, they're losing trust in universities, in scientists, and you try and give them something, and you say, well, here's what it could be. Here's what your role could be. So lay out for us a little bit more specifically what that is that you're telling these people who come up to you.
Well, I'm telling them, stop making excuses for yourself and rendering yourself powerless. And then you either turn on yourself, you pick up an addiction, or you get nasty, or you get cynical and put people like Trump, who lie to you, in office. So the first step in civic self-respect is just to get people to say, I count, I matter, I have significance. And how do you get them to say that? Look at history. Why do you think Richard Nixon, arch conservative corporatist when he was president, signed into law the Environmental Protection Agency, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration? You signed into law the Product Safety Commission. You put in an environmental advisor in the White House that Congress wanted him to do. The air and water pollution laws, except the water pollution law, he vetoed. But why did he do all that? Because he heard the rumble from the people coming out of the 60s. He was the last Republican to fear liberals. He heard the rumble. And every citizen can contribute to that rumble. They can contribute when these politicians come around the campaign and shake hands. They can not just be flattered by them and smile. They can demand something. They can hold their hand in a handshake until they get a commitment. They can summon them to their own town meetings. We even have a summons where people can turn it around instead of the senator representative choreographing it. So that's what you're seeing around the country right now. You're seeing the rumble starting to increase, and you're seeing young challengers of Democratic corporate incumbents, primaries. You're seeing that. You're going to see at least 15 to 20 challengers of old-line Democrat incumbents like Richie Neal in Massachusetts, who was a corporate Democrat and felt pretty good about the Trump tax cuts when he became chair in 2019 of the House Ways and Means Committee. He said he wasn't going to revisit them. He's being challenged. They're being challenged in Michigan. They're being challenged in a congressperson in Florida. So you're getting an electoral rumble. An electoral rumble expands when more people have the civic self-respect. Civic self-respect is not just for ordinary people in their various roles. I mean, you got people now who are veterans for peace, okay? You have several thousand veterans who said, we know a lot about war. We know a lot about how it's boomeranging. We know a lot about all the killings abroad by the U.S. empire, and we're going to do something about it. And they got 100 chapters. They do nonviolent civil disobedience. And as we talk, they're in their third week of a hunger fast in communion with the starving people in Gaza under the heel of the fascist terrorist Netanyahu. So they're doing their part, but it's just a tiny number. Well, what if it was 4 times as much, 10 times as much? That's what we got to talk about. No one in Veterans for Peace said, I don't count. They're using their experience to create a civic dimension to what they've gone through, and they have moral authority, and they're doing it. So this book has all kinds of examples of people who start out in the day as a consumer or worker or voter or taxpayer or parent, and they say, hey, there's something I don't like here. I want more physical education in the schools. I want more civic education in the schools. I'm going to go down to the parent-teacher meeting. I'm going to find out who agrees with me. Well, it turns out, Nathan, that there is a lot of left-right agreement in this country. This business of polarization, red state, blue state, is a 2,000-year-old manipulation of divide and rule by the ruling classes. You can. I wrote a book called Unstoppable, where I easily listed 25 major areas where there is left-right support in this country, conservative, liberal, like cracking down on corporate crime. At one point, there was 90% of the people wanted to break up the big New York banks after the collapse and the unemployment and the recession in 2008, 2009. And if you go down the abstraction ladder and get away from the politicians' ideological manipulations and slogans, people want safe food, they want clean water, they want good public services, they want fair taxes, they want schools that work, whether they're conservatives or liberals. They want a living wage, they want an adequate retirement package, they want to be respected in the workplace that's safe and provides them with dignity, unlike Starbucks and these other groups, Amazon warehouses. So that's a huge opportunity for mobilization and a democratic takeover of our government, small d, by the people. Remember, the people are the only people mentioned in the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't mention corporations or company or political parties. It's we the people. It's not we the corporation. It's not we the Congress. So that means that people, when they get civic self-respect, they realize, gee, we're the sovereign. We have the sovereign power. No one else has a sovereign power. So that develops more civic self-respect, and it becomes cumulative. You think the former presidents of the United States, George W. Bush, Clinton, Obama, and Biden, have civic self-respect? They're not taking on Trump. Trump's destroying the AIDS program that was the only thing George W. Bush could be proud of, and he shuts his mouth. And Obama, they're going after Obamacare, and Obama's hardly speaking out, and Clinton and on. So the civic self-respect is top all the way to the top down and bottom up. And that's why this book is written. And you cannot escape this book if you read it, because it's all about you, people.
You're right that people do want a lot of the same things. There is kind of a consensus around these basic human rights, these sensible public policies, but they can feel so out of reach. And as I say, you are really trying to overcome here a deep sense of pessimism and hopelessness. It's certainly activists on climate change or pro-Palestine activists who couldn't even get Kamala Harris to meet with the families of Gaza victims can feel really like it's so hard to actually shift public policy. But over your career, you did successfully shift public policy. And I wonder what lessons we could draw from looking back over, your experience in taking things where, and actually managing to achieve real substantive victories. I mean, you talked about the pressure to get Nixon to resign. You talked about the pressure to get Nixon to sign environmental legislation. What are some other examples where organized citizens have actually succeeded in getting meaningful concessions, meaningful gains?
Mothers Against Drunk Driving. How about that? How about the gay rights movement? That was considered totally impossible. How about the women's rights movement? How about the civil rights movement? How about the environmental movement? I mean, when I started with the environmental effort, They said, "You're going to get lead out of gasoline." Do you know how powerful the oil industry is in this country? They own Congress, but it's all a matter of numbers. Let me give you a metaphor. You're driving on a highway with other cars. Suddenly, all the cars stop because there's a boulder in the road. So some drivers get out, three of them, and they try to push the boulder to the side, and it doesn't move. So they call on three more, and it doesn't move. And they call on four more drivers up in the line, and it starts moving. So it's a numbers game as well. Our history is full of a tiny number of people. So what is the number that's needed? 1% of the people in the congressional districts. Remember this, 1%. This isn't the other 1%, the Wall Street 1%. 1% of voters in congressional districts, that's 2.5 million people, organizing Congress watchdog groups where they do the following. They set up an agenda of long overdue changes, some of which we just mentioned. Number two, they know what they're talking about. They're accurate. Number three, they represent public opinion. I just mentioned some of the 85% support, etc. And number four, do they just march and demonstrate with the energy going into the ether? Or do they focus on the decision makers? In this case, the Congress, 535 people. Warren Buffett once said, there's only 535 people. We're millions of people. How come we can't control them? Okay, so throughout history, all the major changes we liked for justice, not one of them required 1% of the people. Volunteering, like a hobby. A hobby is like, what is it, 5-10 hours a week? Those who volunteer, Congress Watchdog Group, they set up an office with 2 full-time people in each district to do the daily work. They summon the members. They're not working with email, not returned, phone calls, not returned. They summon them to town meetings, 500 clear signatures on a petition with the description of what the person is, the occupation, email, signature will get you a member of Congress regardless to your town meeting with very few exceptions. And 1,000 on a petition will get you a senator. That means you got the power that you have delegated to the senator's representatives sitting right there in front of you. No flacks, no intermediaries, no one in between. And you, the citizenry, run the town meeting. We want universal health care. Every other country has it. 2,000 people a week are dying because they can't get diagnosed and treated in time because they can't afford it. We want it. The public wants it. We're sending you back to Washington. That kind of specific, informed demand. And then we want to know what you're saying. And the press is right there. We want to know what's your response here. These members of Congress caved fast when they realized that the money they raised from these commercial interests are nowhere near as important as the votes they desperately want back home. They want money in order to intimidate primary challengers and get a safe seat. But if you show them you don't have a safe seat anymore, those days are over. It takes just 1% of the people with those conditions, representing public opinion, knowing what they're talking about, focusing on direct meetings by the decision makers.
Ralph, what you're saying here makes me think that in many ways, you can't fight City Hall might be one of the most dangerous myths that we have in our culture, and that in fact the strongest weapon that the ruling class might have is in fact people's belief in their own powerlessness in fighting the ruling class.
Precisely. You hit the nail on the head. I wrote a column a while back on the educational system that educates children to become powerless. They don't have civic education. They don't connect with community issues. They don't connect knowledge to action. They don't show what these kids' rights are. My sister wrote a book recently called "You Are Your Own Best Teacher," tapping into the imagination and curiosity of preteens to liberate themselves from the internet gulag. The Silicon Valley monsters are electronic child molesters. They got 5 to 7 hours a day from many of these children, separating from themselves from their parents, community, nature. Corporations are raising our kids. Well, it doesn't take much to beat back on that, because you got red state parents and blue state parents who have lost control of their kids, and they know it, and they're mad, and they know who's doing it. But it does need organization and civic self-respect, because when they, as you said, when they say to people you can't fight City Hall, that's a way to try to get them to render themselves powerless, to make them not want to develop civic skills in adult education. What are civic skills? That's something that we should ask ourselves as citizens. For example, there are two questions that every reporter and every citizen should ask an elected politician on a particular position the politician takes. Question one: what is the legal authority for your declaration or your proposal? Question two: what is the evidence to back up your claim? They never ask Trump that. When Trump lies to them, when he does things that are manifestly false, cruel, and vicious with his executive orders, the press almost never says, what's the evidence? He got years of acclaim by the MAGA guys that the 2020 election was stolen. But the press never said, give me your evidence. We said, 3 million illegal immigrants voted. Where's the evidence of that? Come on, give me your evidence. We want documentation. Otherwise, shut up.
There's almost like an excessive cynicism, the idea that, because he lies so much, well, it's futile to almost challenge this stuff. And one of the things I just truly have always appreciated about your work is that it's sort of you don't have any illusions about corporate power, about fascism, but you never lapse into pessimism and cynicism. You still believe in these values of, well, okay, let's stay informed, let's take action, let's hold these people accountable, let's not tolerate lies, let's call them for what they are. And you manage somehow in a world that to many people can seem so bleak that it's not worth trying to do anything. You manage to, without downplaying the problems, in fact, in many ways stating them in a more extreme fashion than many people would say, to use words like fascism, dictatorship, to oligarchy, and yet somehow to still maintain the determination that it is possible to radically alter the situation that we're in.
Hope you're enjoying this interview. If you want to listen to full-length current affairs interviews before they are made fully available to the public, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/currentaffairs and become a supporter today.